So Rose is in its 30th year of business, and we worked with a client that was a startup with us. We hit about 400 plus million in revenue. We've had exits that have been $5 million, and we've also had exits of 155 million. And we've also had a couple unicorns along the way. How do you scale the back office of an organization from startup to $100 million and beyond? Where do founders get themselves tripped up eventually over time? We call this the founder's trap. Growth can happen quickly. You need to be prepared, but also losses can accrue quickly if you're not getting fast enough feedback. The job of the finance and accounting function, strategic CFO playbook, is to reduce the risk of success for an organization.
Between 2015 and 2024, over 43 million new business applications were filed in the U.S. That's more than 4.3 million every year. New ideas, new energy, and new potential. But even with all those new business applications, only a small fraction ever break through. Currently, only 4% have reached $1 million in revenue. Under 0.5% have reached $10 million in revenue. And just 21,000 have hit the $100 million mark. So why do so few businesses scale beyond the startup phase? After 30 years of working with growing businesses, I've seen the difference between founders that scale and those that don't. At Rose, we believe financial clarity is a key attribute of the foundation for businesses that scale.
So Rose is in its 30th year of business, and we've worked with startups that have scaled from to 10 million all the way up through last year. Our largest client that was a startup with us hit about 400 plus million in revenue. We've also helped organizations to exit. That's an ultimate goal for a lot of entrepreneurs. We've had exits that we've helped that have been $5 million, and we've also had exits of 155 million. And we've also had a couple unicorns along the way. In asking the first question, what do most successful founders have in common? We're going to cover that. We're also going to talk about what's the actual goal of the strategic CFO playbook, and then why is a modern financial infrastructure required for a business to scale in 2025 and beyond. And then lastly, we're going to talk about what's required to build a modern financial infrastructure today. To answer this question, I asked myself, what do the most successful entrepreneurs that we've worked with have in common over the past 30 years? Well, first of all, they understand their industry very well. They're experts in their industry, and they understand their customers. They spend their time focused on understanding those customers. They have a very clear vision and mission for their organization. They know where they want to go, and they have an idea on how to get there. They know what they're good at, and they have a plan on how they're going to excel. They also are focused on their goals and how to minimize distractions. To minimize those distractions, they surround themselves with a strong team. They understand their numbers. They understand that finance, accounting, and tax are a priority, and they understand that solid financial performance is a result of proper execution. Proper execution is required to scale, and that financial results are the scorecard for any successful business. So where do founders get themselves tripped up eventually over time? We call this the founder's trap. So on this graph, it's an S-curve that compares how founders manage risk versus reward. Conversely, it's a probability of success versus the risk of loss. So as you move up the y-axis, you're increasing the required probability of success or reducing the risk of loss. And as you move right on the x-axis, you're increasing the value of the company for an entrepreneur. So every founder has a unique amount and individual value that they are willing to put at risk without the elimination of risk of loss. So every one of us can tolerate the risk of the loss of a smaller amount. And as that amount becomes larger, the risk of loss or the probability of success has to go up. So is there anyone here a Commanders fan? Anyone here not a Commanders fan? Okay. I'll bet you a quarter that the Commanders will not win the Super Bowl. You gonna take that bet? Oh yeah. Right. You feel that, right? You feel it. Feel it in your bones. So I want to change the bet now, and I'll bet you $1 million that the Commanders don't win the Super Bowl. Are you in? 5% chance, according to the bookies this morning. You in? Maybe? All right, how about 10? So the reality is all of us will take the 25-cent bet for something that has a low probability of success. But even at 5%, we all have a number. I could go to 100 million. I know I'll get them at 100 million or $1 billion. But the bottom line is we all have a number where we need to increase the probability of success before we're willing to take that bet. And that's ultimately the job of the finance and accounting function, strategic CFO playbook, is to reduce the risk of success for an organization. How do founders reduce the risk of success? In the early stages, they start off trying to control everything. So a lot of times they do things themselves. And so in doing things themselves, like finance and accounting, they're in tune with things. They're reducing fear, uncertainty, and doubt because they're involved in everything. And they're reducing what I would call the perceived risk, the risk that they're aware of. But ultimately, there's a lot of risk that they're not aware of. That's the actual risk of a specific function. So what are the benefits that they get from managing things themselves? Well, they get a lower cost, and again, that reduced perceived risk. But a trusted advisor can give the founder a path forward, identify known risks based on their expertise, and provide a path forward, allowing them to avoid many of the pitfalls, and again, helping them move further up to the improved probability of success. So again, the actual goal of strategic CFO playbook is focused on the reduction of actual risk, whether it's perceived by the founder or not. This allows the founder to continue to move up the curve. Many people call this the maximizing the return on investment, but the return on investment doesn't necessarily involve the psychology that founders and business leaders experience. So why is a modern financial infrastructure required to scale in 2025? Well, digital marketplaces or digital business models are now ubiquitous. Finance and accounting must integrate with digital business models without creating friction or slowing down the process. And digital business models increase the business cycle speeds, which then means that growth can happen quickly. You need to be prepared, but also losses can accrue quickly if you're not getting fast enough feedback. Financial reports showing business results must meet the business cycles that are occurring. And again, in the digital world, that those can be accelerated. There's also a shortage of skilled accountants. And so it's difficult for earlier stage companies to bring in the skills that they need internally and the end result, and to be able to maintain those skills and those individuals as they grow. But wouldn't you think that turning to low-cost labor, whether that be international, being another alternative? Certainly it does reduce the costs, but does it really reduce the organizational risk? And I think the answer might be no to that. It reduces the amount of loss a firm would experience from maybe a bad hire in the US, but at the end of the day, it does not reduce the organizational risk. So we're in a new phase, and that's the transformation from labor arbitrage to automation arbitrage. And what are the benefits of automation arbitrage as compared to a labor arbitrage? Well, the first is reduces the need for hiring additional resources. It eliminates time zone issues, reduces inefficiencies based on the number of people that are involved in a process and the bottlenecks associated with that process. It increases the speed and scale of processing, but also improves the speed of and availability of information. So what's required to build a modern financial infrastructure? Well, certainly you need financial management, that CFO guidance, that oversight of the entire operation. You need the accounting, you need the project accounting, you need the project controls, you need the transaction processing and functional management that really keep the trains running day-to-day basis. You have your tax and compliance issues. whether it be federal and state income taxes, state and local compliance taxes, DCA and GovCon compliance, and then ultimately dealing with all of the technology issues that go along with that. And increasingly, as we have more point solutions being built, it's the integration of those different systems together that become a choke point for a lot of organizations. So the expertise must be structured in what we call the 5 pillars of financial management: the people, the process, the technology, the entire organization of skills that have to come together to make all of this work. And then ultimately, I would say the sleeper in here is the data, the ability to accumulate and amass the data that's required to produce the information, but also to take advantage of AI. So all the expertise required must fit into this framework to build a cost-effective and scalable financial infrastructure. And this is where it gets fun. As an organization grows from startup to scaling to growth and into a full enterprise, each of these 5 pillars become more complex, exponentially more complex. The people need to grow from founder-led to people wearing many hats. And we need specialists that include professional management. The process needs to evolve from ad hoc processes, person-dependent SOPs, interdepartmental processes, and then also continuous improvement as change is occurring within the business. The technology needs transition. Starts with spreadsheets and emails, moves to CRMs, ERPs, other business systems that all need to be connected, and ultimately to systems of engagement with data lakes and data warehouses. The organization needs to evolve from flat to departments, multi-org charts, board oversight, and leadership development. And then the data expands from limited tracking to KPIs, cross-departmental reporting, then predictive and prescriptive analytics, which is, again, another area that AI is poised to excel. So in each of these risk factors, as they increase, as complexity increases exponentially, the need for experts and specialists becomes more obvious than in the beginning. But organizations need to figure out, how do you grow the maturity of each of these pillars as they scale? And we're going to come back to this slide at the end of the day. But as we go through the day, I want you to keep in mind these questions. Of what stage of growth is your company currently? And where do you expect that stage of growth to be in the next couple of years? So what's the maturity of each of those pillars, all 5 pillars currently? Where are you in developing your people? How mature are your processes? How scalable and connected is your technology? How complete is your organization? Do you have the expertise on your finance team to support the transition to the next stage of growth? Can your team work together through the change management in each of those areas? Are you making good use of your data? Are you turning that data into information? And then the ultimate question is, how can you guarantee a steady flow of financial information to leadership to reduce not just the perceived risks, but also the unperceived risks?